Hi, my name is Sander Huizinga and I will present you in this video how to create a logical object model. First of all, you should have opened the tutorial sample in Enterprise Architect. When you've opened it, then you can go to the Energy Domain package, open it, then go to the LOM information package and then double click on the diagram. This diagram is just a made-up example, so this is not a real life example, about the information exchanged between an energy supplier and a household client. So, for instance, the connection here defined is the connection you have as a household client in your home, and it can be a gas or an electric connection. Well, how do you create a logical object model? Well, for instance, we want to add in this example an invoice object because a supplier needs to invoice a client when he is using a connection. Well, an invoice object can be added by clicking on the class, hold the left mouse button and drag it on the diagram and then release it. A menu pops up and then you can give this object a name. In this case we call it an invoice. If you have entered the name, you can click on apply, OK, and you've entered the object into the diagram of this tutorial. Well, an object is not by itself in a diagram, it's always connected to one of the other objects. So in this case you select the arrow. If you, for example, selecting once the invoice, you see the arrow here. Then you click on it and drag it on to, in this case, on the contract and release it. And you select association. Well, you don't only have an association between objects, but also a cardinality, like what you see here. A contract always has one client, and a client may have 0 or more contracts with a supplier. Well, this means for this instance that an invoice can be, for instance, be applied to one or more contracts, and a contract may have 0 to many invoices. Well, this can be done by double clicking on the association and clicking source role. In this case it's the invoice role, so this means that the multiplicity, or which is equivalent to cardinality, is in this case 0 to many, and clicking OK. And then you will see that the contract has 0 or more invoices. The other way around is by double clicking on the association again and then selecting target, and then you see contract role, and in this case it's at least one and maybe many more invoices for a particular contract. So an invoice has one or more contracts to be applicable on. Well, an invoice is not only an empty object, it also has some attributes. So we double click on invoice again, we go to details, and then we select attributes. And then we can add attributes to a specific invoice. So in this case, an invoice will have always an identifier, an identifying code on top of it. And now the biggest issue in this methodology is that every attribute is derived from a logical data type. And if I'm selecting this button, you will see a list of all the data types available, and an identifier is of the type identifier. And then you click OK, save, and then you will see in the diagram that the identifier in the invoice is of type identifier. While an invoice may have other attributes as well. For instance, a date when the invoice is made. So creation date. And this is of the type date. And an invoice, of course, has a quantity or price or something in which you state what the invoice amount will be. Maybe you can select, in this case, quantity as a data type and then selecting save. Well, as you can see, you can build up quite fast a data model for information exchange between two parties. And this is basically how the creation of a logical object model works. The only thing you now need to have to do is to check, to validate if this model is correct in the perspective of completeness and the semantics that is used for naming all the attributes and objects. And this can be done by the LUXE-Tooling. The LUXE-Tooling can be used for validating the object model by right-clicking on a package, add in LUXE-Tooling, and then you will see Validate Logical Object Model. If you left-clicking on it, you will see this menu appear, and then select the Validate option. What you will see here are warnings and errors that are applicable on this particular object model, and the warnings are errors, or warnings are those messages that are maybe not really a big problem for creating a model or even implementing it in messages, but may state some things that you need to have attention on when you want to explain a logical object model, like descriptions. But the errors are the real ones that you need to focus on. And if I deselect the warnings, you will see there are 3 errors left, and those are the logical data types that we need to use for a logical object model. And this is the next video all about how to create a logical data models, or logical data types, enumerative data types, and composite data types required for this logical object model. So I'm pushing the close button, and the next step will be the creation of data types for the address of the client and the supplier, and the type for the connection. I hope I see you in the next video.